to the individual or to the group. And so from that, you have the way of the middle. From that, it evolves things such as the way of harmony, 和文化, the civilization of harmony. A lot of people think that the communist leaders in Beijing today are talking about harmony just to keep power. Well, maybe so. But you should also know something about Chinese history and Chinese civilization. That this is something that is in the Chinese civilization, that means in the blood of every Chinese, for the last 2,000 years, if not longer. And so, if you were to understand the Chinese, you have to understand these civilizational dynamics. Because of this emphasis on harmony, the groupness, if you will, becomes very important. Instead of emphasizing the individuals, you emphasize the group. The Western tradition emphasizes rights, in particular human rights, in particular individual rights. You know, the Chinese, you can hardly find a word for the word rights. In its Chinese writings of the last 2,000 years, hardly can you find the word rights in it. It is not in the Chinese vocabulary almost. Rather, it emphasizes the need to have the proper relationship. In the West, everybody is a cousin. First cousin, second cousin, third cousin. In the Chinese, they have a specific term for every relationship because that is a society that is relationship-based rather than individually based. Which is better, which is worse? No value judgment. You are what you are. I am Chinese, that's why I'm so short. I'm sorry. You are what you are. And I'm no qualms about it. No apology necessary. I am just what I am. And the Chinese are the Chinese. And the Westerners are the Westerners. Let it be. Let's not impose what you are on other people. Jack, you're to be as short as I am. Let's cut down 5 inches from you. You can't do that. Neither can you give me 5 inches. I would love that, but anyway. Right? So, you know, the emphasis is very, very different. Very, very different. And, of course, in order to keep those kind of relationship, the Chinese eventually evolve into a very natural kind of system that is a very hierarchical system. That is only system that is possible when you emphasize the relationship such that somebody got to be calling the shot, right? In the West, you vote who's the leader. In the Chinese, who's older? The oldest one is the leader. And so the system is very, very different. The problem with the Chinese system is that whereas it seems to be a system that strives for stability, in its very stability, if it lasts, is embedded tremendous amount of instability. There's a lot of instability in the system, especially in the modern days, in a system that emphasizes a structure that is rigid, that only allows stability. Eventually, that may well become a source of instability. So now let me conclude. So what are the problems of the Chinese? The Chinese face the problem of institution building. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Those kind of relationship, it can be part of society, part of the glue that keeps society together. But as the world changes, with technology, with the interaction with the rest of the world, with globalization, the impact on the Chinese society is tremendous. And I argue that they must find a way to somehow find an institution, find a structure, find a system that is, whatever the inner nature may be, ultimately produce a system which is relatively stable. I see today's China as extraordinarily unstable. So far, so good. But as I told the journalists before this meeting, I said, I've been predicting social problems in China for the last 10 years. So people say, Ronnie, you've been wrong for 10 years. I said, that's right, but I'm 10 years closer to being right. I may be wrong, and I wish that I were wrong. But as an observer of human nature, I believe that that system, whilst struggling to maintain stability, is embedded in it a lot of instability. And for that, we need to learn from a page from the West. We need to somehow find institutions which will work for the Chinese. Now, don't assume, by now you must not assume, that Ronnie Chan believes that we should go the Western way, hook, line, and sinker. I believe for all the civilizational issues that I mentioned, the Chinese, that may not be the best form of government or system for the Chinese. Moreover, there's another reason why I think that the Chinese cannot take the way of the West. A friend of mine, an Indian gentleman, who is a second-generation Malaysian, Indian Malaysian, living in Hong Kong for the last 20-some years, has recently written a book. His name is Chandran Nair. He wrote a book called Consumptionomics. Anybody read that book? Probably most of you don't even know that book. But I think, Jack, we're trying to, Bruce, where are you, Bruce Pickering? We're trying to introduce this gentleman to the San Francisco, Northern California Center of the Asian Society. Hopefully he can speak with you. I think what he has to say is worth listening to. Basically, he's the one that says that if the Asians were to live like the Westerners, the globe cannot bear it. He cited, I'll just give you a couple of examples. OECD country, for every 1,000 people, there's 150 cars. China, with a huge growth in the last 10 years, is now only at 150 cars, 1/5 of the United States, of the OECD countries. India is only at 35 for every 1,000 people. Imagine the Asians, the Chinese, and the Indians begin to live like the Americans, where you have 750 cars for every 1,000 people. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the oil produced by Saudi Arabia will not be enough to feed all the guzzling cars that we have. A friend of mine, 2 days ago, Khalid Al-Fali, who's a CEO of Saudi Aramco, just announced that they have no intention to increase the daily production from 8 to 9 million barrels a day. Well, actually, they are now at 12, but they only produce about 8 or 9. They would not increase the capacity to 15 million barrels. Let me tell you, if the Chinese and the Indians were to drive cars like in America, they better increase to 15, perhaps 50. They cite another example. Americans, 320 million people, eat 9 billion chicken every year. The Asians has 13 times that much population, but only eat less than 2 times as many of that bird. And if the Asians were to eat as much chicken as the Americans, then they will consume something like, per annum, if my numbers are right, 120 billion chickens. Where do we keep those chickens? Right? And China has something like 400-some million families, and roughly 3.2, 3.3 per family. Huh? And if every Chinese were to have a fish meal once a week, our ocean will be depleted of fish. So just the sheer number is such that Asia cannot go the way of the West. For ourselves, we cannot afford it. For you, the West, you cannot afford it either, because we all share the same globe. And so Asia, in particular China, being the biggest country, arguably the most complicated country, will have to find a way to find a system that is neither hook, line, and sinker Western, nor is it what it is today because of the inherent instability in it. So what challenges China today the most is, I believe, the finding of a way, a system that the Chinese, with 1.35 billion people, can accept, and that can give them relative stability and relative economic prosperity, such that China can become a normal, healthy, functioning member of the international community. And that system cannot be exactly like the West. My friend at Yale 2 days ago, a former USTR trade representative, was complaining how the Chinese have dropped in their domestic consumption from 40-some% to now 35%, lowest, lowest ever. I thought to myself, you want it up? You want it like America with 70%? The world cannot bear it. So I think that for China's sake, for the world's sake, China must have a system that works, hopefully, relatively well for itself. What would that be? Allow me to just offer one possibility. I don't have the solution, obviously. If I do, I will be a Nobel laureate. It will not be the 3 African ladies. But I don't have the solution. But I happen to believe that the world is such that it is moving, like it or not, toward individualism. That is more toward the West, rather than the West moving more toward the East. If so, then some form of governance where people have more say, have more freedom, have more plurality in society will be necessary. One system that I think is not a bad system, that is, Angelina, the Hong Kong system. The Hong Kong system is now chided as undemocratic. Well, let me explain very quickly. I'm going to end right now. What is the Chinese system? The Chinese system is very simple. 50% of the legislature is chosen by popular votes, election, one man, one vote. The other 50% is by what we call, by the way, it's not a Chinese concoction, it's a British concoction, called functional constituencies, where the different segments of society, such as the labor union, will have an extra 3 seats, and the teachers will have 1 seat, the lawyers will have 1 seat, the business community will have 3 seats, or whatever, functional constituencies. That system is now chided as being undemocratic. But the reality is, if it works, why not? Moreover, it is not unlike what you have in the West either. You know, the smallest state, I think, in the United States, Michael, could it be Wyoming? 560,000 people? You have 2 senators. So every 280 people, you have 1 senator. We're sitting in California with what? 37 million people? So every 18.5 million people choose 1 senator. It's not fair. Well, that system is designed to protect the states as well as the individuals. And so basically what the British in the old days and the Chinese adopted it for Hong Kong is that system, where I believe that it has to be more Western based. I accept that. But it also cannot be exactly Western-like, because your system have problem too. I mean, look at the dysfunctional government today. Look at Tom Friedman's latest book. By the way, Tom and I will be speaking together Friday in Hong Kong. His book, That Used to Be Us, right? Right? I mean, you know, something got to change.